Part 1. Background and Context. The Road to San Bernardino. In the stillness of a late autumn morning in Southern California, the Inland Regional Center in San Bernardino quietly prepared for a day that was supposed to be filled with cheer and camaraderie. The building, functional in architecture and set against the hazy backdrop of the San Bernardino Mountains, was hosting a holiday banquet and training event for county employees. Inside its rented conference hall, members of the San Bernardino County Department of Public Health, around 80 people in total, gathered for what was intended to be a light-hearted break from their daily responsibilities. One of those employees was Syed Rizwan Farook, a 28-year-old environmental health inspector who had worked for the department for over 5 years. Soft-spoken and devout, Farook rarely stood out among his colleagues. Most saw him as polite, reserved, perhaps a little aloof. He prayed regularly, followed halal dietary laws and abstained from alcohol. Some of his co-workers described him as distant but never aggressive. But what no one realized, not his supervisors, his teammates, or even his family, was that beneath the exterior of a quiet government worker was a man methodically planning mass murder. To understand how Farook came to this point, we have to look back, far beyond the Inland Regional Center and deep into his family history. Black Medium Square, the Farook family. Syed Rizwan Farook was born on June 14, 1987 in Chicago, Illinois, to Syed Raheel Farook and Rafia Farook, a Pakistani immigrant couple who had arrived in the U.S. in the 1980s. The family moved to Southern California when Syed was a child, settling in Riverside, a middle-class city in the Inland Empire region. They lived in a modest suburban home, and Syed grew up in a house shaped by deep contradictions. His father, Raheel, was known to be abusive and violent. In court documents from a divorce case later filed by his mother, Rafia, it was revealed that Raheel was an alcoholic who regularly beat his wife in front of their children and threatened to kill her on more than one occasion. The household was fractured, emotionally and spiritually. Despite the turmoil, Syed performed well in school. He was quiet, intelligent, and showed a strong aptitude for science and technology. He attended La Sierra High School and later went on to study at California State University, San Bernardino, where he earned a degree in environmental health. Those who knew him from college recalled a somewhat awkward but courteous man, conservative in his dress, meticulous in his habits, and extremely devout in his faith. He sometimes made statements that hinted at deeper ideological views, such as criticizing U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, but nothing that set off alarm bells. He was, after all, just one among thousands of young Muslim men in America trying to navigate identity in a post-9/11 world. Around 2013, in his mid-20s, Farook began searching for a wife through online Islamic matchmaking websites. His criteria were specific. He wanted a woman who was pious, conservative, and serious about faith. That's when he met Tashfeen Malik. Black Medium Square, the life of Tashfeen Malik. Tashfeen Malik was born on July 13, 1986, in Pakistan, but spent much of her childhood and adult life in Saudi Arabia, where her family had emigrated in the early 1990s. Raised in a relatively conservative household, Tashfeen's world was shaped by the harsh, doctrinal environment of Saudi Wahhabism, a strict and literalist form of Islam that left little room for moderate interpretation. Her family was middle class. Her father was a civil engineer, and the family had deep tribal roots in Pakistan's Punjab region. She returned to Pakistan briefly in her early 20s to pursue a degree in pharmacy at Bahauddin Zakaria University in Multan, a major city in southern Punjab. During her studies, classmates noticed that she became increasingly religious, even militant in her expressions. She wore the niqab, criticized more liberal Muslim peers, and appeared obsessed with purity and jihad. It was around this time that she may have begun consuming extremist literature and online propaganda. Though she never joined any known militant group, her ideology was taking form and hardening. In 2013, she and Farook began communicating. Their relationship progressed quickly. He flew to Saudi Arabia to meet her and returned to the United States shortly afterward. In July 2014, she arrived in the U.S. on a K-1 fiancé visa, a legal path that allows foreign nationals to marry American citizens within 90 days of arrival. The visa process included interviews and screenings, but nothing in her background raised any red flags at the time. They married soon after and settled into a townhouse in Redlands, an unassuming community with tree-lined streets and well-kept homes. From the outside, they looked like any other young couple starting a life together. They had a baby daughter in 2015, and Syed's mother, Rafia, moved in with them to help with childcare. But there were signs of secrecy. Neighbors said the couple rarely spoke to anyone. The blinds were always closed. Packages of electronics and tools were delivered regularly. And in their garage, hidden from public view, was a growing cache of weapons and explosives. Unbeknownst to anyone, their shared ideology had evolved into a death pact. They had sworn themselves to the cause of violent jihad and were now following a playbook familiar to intelligence officials. A homegrown terrorist cell radicalized through online content, not direct contact with a terror group. They watched videos from ISIS and Al-Qaeda, read bomb-making instructions from Inspire magazine, and began assembling pipe bombs using Christmas lights, PVC pipes and smokeless powder. The act they were planning wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. They chose a location they knew intimately, filled with people Farook had worked beside for years. Their plan was simple: inflict maximum damage, escape, and potentially carry out additional attacks if possible. In doing so, they would fulfill what they believed to be a sacred obligation: to defend Islam by striking at the heart of the Western infidels who, in their minds, had waged war on Muslims around the world. On the morning of December 2, 2015, they left their 6-month-old daughter in the care of Farook's mother. They told her they had a doctor's appointment. Then they loaded their black Ford Expedition SUV with rifles, pistols, a remote-controlled bomb, tactical gear, and over 1,600 rounds of ammunition. By the time they returned to the Inland Regional Center, the holiday party was already in full swing. And the quiet, devout man his co-workers thought they knew was about to become the face of one of the deadliest terrorist attacks on American soil since 9/11. Part 2. The Attack. December 2, 2015. The morning of December 2, 2015, began like any other workday for the San Bernardino County Department of Public Health. Employees arrived at the Inland Regional Center, chatting over coffee and greeting one another with holiday cheer. The rented conference room was decorated simply, with folding chairs arranged around circular tables. There was a breakfast buffet, a small gift exchange, and laughter in the air, an attempt to bring some warmth into a typically routine work environment. Among those present was Syed Rizwan Farook, dressed in his usual work attire. He blended in with his co-workers as he greeted a few of them and sat down at a table. He even posed for a few pictures and exchanged polite small talk. He was calm, eerily calm, some survivors would later recall. No one suspected what he was about to do. Shortly after 10:30 a.m., Farook quietly excused himself from the event. He told a colleague he needed to step out. Some thought he was upset, perhaps annoyed by something said during a discussion. But it was nothing out of the ordinary. What they didn't know was that he was heading to a nearby location where his wife, Tashfeen Malik, was waiting in their black SUV, parked and loaded with weapons. Roughly 30 minutes later, at 10:59 a.m., the SUV returned to the Inland Regional Center parking lot. Both Farook and Malik stepped out, now dressed head to toe in black tactical clothing. They wore body armor, ski masks, and carried 2 semi-automatic rifles, each capable of firing dozens of rounds in rapid succession. They entered the building through a side door with grim precision, knowing exactly where the gathering was taking place. Within seconds, the sound of gunfire shattered the festive mood. Chaos erupted as more than 100 rounds were fired into the crowd. People dove under tables, others ran for exits, many froze in confusion. Farook methodically targeted his co-workers, people who had sat beside him moments earlier. Malik fired with equal intensity, showing no hesitation. In less than 5 minutes, 14 people lay dead and 22 others were wounded, some critically. As people screamed and tried to flee, the attackers left behind a remote-controlled pipe bomb hidden inside a backpack. It was meant to detonate once first responders entered the building, but the device malfunctioned and never exploded. The couple then retreated, exiting the building and disappearing into traffic before emergency responders arrived. Inside the conference room, the scene was harrowing: broken glass, bloodied walls, overturned tables, and the moans of the wounded echoing against the walls. Survivors helped each other, improvised tourniquets, and hid in closets, texting loved ones that they might not survive. The first 911 call came in at 11 a.m., and within minutes, dozens of police and SWAT units had descended on the scene. By the time the magnitude of the attack became clear, the assailants had vanished into the city. What began as a festive workplace holiday celebration had, in moments, turned into one of the deadliest terrorist attacks on American soil since 9/11, carried out not by foreign invaders, but by a husband and wife who had lived quietly among their victims for over a year. Part 3: The Manhunt and Shootout. By late morning on December 2, 2015, the quiet city of San Bernardino had become the center of a rapidly unfolding crisis. Police had arrived within minutes of the first 911 call. What they found was a grim and chaotic scene. Bodies on the floor, gunshot wounds, blood-soaked clothing and shell casings scattered across the room. Survivors huddled in bathrooms and conference rooms, some still clutching their phones, whispering updates to loved ones as tactical teams began securing the building. What officers didn't yet know was the identity of the shooters, only that they had vanished. Witnesses described two individuals dressed in black, wearing masks, heavily armed and moving with purpose. That information was quickly passed up the chain, and local police were joined by the FBI, ATF, and Department of Homeland Security in what was now being treated as a possible terrorist attack. The turning point came quickly. Within just a few hours, investigators learned that Syed Farook had attended the party earlier that morning, and then left right before the shooting. Suspicion fell on him immediately. His name was cross-checked with DMV records, and the description of the black Ford Expedition seen fleeing the scene matched a vehicle registered to Farook's family. Police now had a name. They had a vehicle. And they had a lead. Around 3 p.m., police began surveilling Farook's townhouse in Redlands, just a few miles from the Inland Regional Center. As SWAT units were preparing to move in, a black SUV was spotted leaving the home. Officers quickly followed. The pursuit began. At 3:10 p.m. in a quiet residential neighborhood on San Bernardino Avenue, the chase ended in a dramatic confrontation. The suspects pulled over, but they didn't surrender. Instead, they unleashed a storm of bullets from inside the SUV. Police returned fire immediately. What followed was an intense shootout lasting over 2 minutes, with more than 400 rounds exchanged. Syed Farook was behind the wheel, firing from the driver's seat. Tashfeen Malik was in the back, shooting through a broken rear window. The sheer volume of gunfire echoed through the streets, forcing neighbors to shelter in place. Police described the couple's firepower as military-grade. Inside the SUV were 2 AR-15U-style rifles, 2 semi-automatic handguns, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. The vehicle had been modified with tactical pouches, and they wore GoPro cameras mounted to their chest rigs, suggesting they may have intended to record the attack. When the gunfire stopped, both shooters were dead. Syed Farook slumped over the steering wheel and Tashfeen Malik lying in the back seat, riddled with bullets. Officers cautiously approached, fearing the SUV might be rigged to explode. A bomb squad was called in to secure the vehicle. A search of the bodies revealed more weapons and ammunition. They were prepared for a much longer battle, perhaps even planning additional attacks. Back at their home in Redlands, investigators discovered a makeshift bomb factory in their garage. Tools, pipes, Christmas lights, remote control toys, black powder and flash drives full of radical propaganda. There were plans for additional IEDs and evidence they had attempted to build remote detonated explosives. The immediate threat was over. But the scale of what the couple had intended, and the ideology behind it, was just beginning to unfold. Weapons, bombs and planning. The perpetrators of the 2015 San Bernardino attack, Syed Rizwan Farook and Tashfeen Malik, were armed with a range of deadly weapons. They had 2 AR-15 style rifles, specifically Smith & Wesson M and P15S, which are popular among mass shooters due to their high-powered capabilities. In addition to these rifles, the couple possessed 2 semi-automatic pistols, a 9mm Llama and a .45 caliber Springfield Armory XD. A staggering 4,500 rounds of ammunition were also discovered in their home, signaling their readiness for a prolonged assault. Regarding explosives, the couple had a remote-controlled pipe bomb, which was similar to devices used by insurgents in Iraq and Afghanistan. This suggests a clear connection to militant tactics. Furthermore, investigators uncovered 12 additional pipe bombs at their residence, along with tools and chemicals indicative of bomb-making operations. It became evident that the couple had studied bomb-making techniques, possibly through extremist online content, including publications associated with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. In terms of their planning, the couple had practiced at local shooting ranges and their garage was turned into a makeshift bomb laboratory, where they tested devices in surrounding areas. Evidence suggests that their preparations spanned several months, and they took deliberate steps to erase their digital communications before launching the attack. The perpetrators, Syed Rizwan Farook and Tashfeen Malik. Syed Rizwan Farook, born in Chicago and raised in Southern California, was the male perpetrator. He was described as a devout Muslim who was generally quiet and polite by his colleagues at the health department, where he worked for 5 years in the field of environmental health. He met Tashfeen Malik, his future wife, online, and in 2013 he traveled to Saudi Arabia to marry her. Malik, born in Pakistan and raised in Saudi Arabia, was highly educated, having studied pharmacy in Pakistan. In her 20s she reportedly became more religiously conservative. She arrived in the United States in 2014 on a K-1 fiancé visa and passed the requisite background checks and interviews with U.S. immigration authorities. Both Farook and Malik had become radicalized well before their marriage. They consumed extremist content online and supported violent jihadist ideologies. Malik even pledged allegiance to ISIS on Facebook shortly before carrying out the attack. The couple's shared radicalization and violent motivations were central to the unfolding of the tragic events in San Bernardino. FBI investigation and terrorism classification. Initially, the motive behind the San Bernardino shooting was unclear. Authorities were uncertain whether the attack was an act of workplace violence, a personal grievance, or something more sinister. Farook did not have any known conflicts with his co-workers, and nothing in his history immediately suggested a connection to terrorism. However, as the investigation progressed, the FBI uncovered evidence of Farook's and Malik's radicalization through their online activities and communications with overseas extremists. Additionally, Malik's public pledge of allegiance to ISIS solidified the idea that the attack was indeed an act of terrorism, and the FBI officially reclassified it as such. One of the most contentious aspects of the investigation revolved around Farook's iPhone, which was encrypted. The FBI demanded that Apple assist in creating a backdoor to access the phone, citing national security concerns. Apple refused, arguing that doing so would set a dangerous precedent that could compromise the privacy and security of millions of users. Ultimately, the FBI accessed the phone using a third-party tool, but despite their efforts, they found no direct evidence of communication with ISIS leadership. Nevertheless, the encryption debate remained a central issue, illustrating the broader tensions between privacy and security in the digital age. Victims and community impact. The 14 victims of the San Bernardino attack ranged in age from their 20s to 60s and came from various backgrounds, with many being parents, immigrants, and lifelong public servants. The survivors endured immense emotional trauma, and many sustained permanent physical disabilities, requiring years of rehabilitation. The community was devastated by the loss of so many innocent lives in such a violent and senseless attack. In the wake of the tragedy, there was an outpouring of support from across the United States. Vigils, memorials, and tributes were held in honor of the victims, and financial contributions poured in to support the victims' families. Muslim communities, particularly in California, expressed deep sorrow over the attack and vehemently condemned the actions of the perpetrators, emphasizing that such violence was completely contrary to the peaceful teachings of Islam. Political and social fallout. The San Bernardino attack reignited several national debates, particularly around the issues of terrorism, Islamic extremism, and gun control. The attack also brought renewed focus to the U.S. immigration system and the vetting process for individuals coming into the country, especially regarding the issuance of K-1 fiancé visas. Additionally, the attack raised concerns over digital privacy and encryption, as the FBI's attempt to force Apple to create a backdoor into Farook's phone sparked a broader conversation about the balance between national security and individual privacy. In terms of policy responses, there were calls for stronger background checks for gun purchases and greater regulation of semi-automatic weapons. Many lawmakers and advocacy groups also advocated for tighter scrutiny of the visa process, particularly for individuals applying for K-1 visas. Finally, there was a push for increased monitoring of online radicalization, especially on encrypted platforms, to detect and disrupt extremist activity before it could result in violence.